Chapter 457. There were many mountains and dense forests outside Reki City. The terrain was complex, and machines had strategic advantages. Within a radius of nearly 100 kilometers outside Reki City, those who were familiar with the terrain could be like fish in water, while those who were unfamiliar with the terrain would be dizzy. The Jianghu family of South America had cooperated with Rekvia for many years. Almost every important person in the Jianghu family of South America was familiar with the terrain inside and outside Reki City. It was precisely because of the deeper and deeper cooperation between the Jianghu family of South America and Rekvia that Wuxia Xianxia decided to establish the largest secret base of the Jianghu family of South America in Eastern Europe outside Reki City. From the Jianghu family of South America to the Rekvia castle to Reki City, in this extremely complex mountainous area, the Jianghu family of South America had carefully drawn a highly accurate hidden road. This path, which could not be considered a path, was very difficult to walk. Its greatest advantage was that it was close enough and hidden enough. It was very close to the Rekvia castle. It was very close to Reki City. Because it was close, when the time was right, it was more convenient for them to attack, provide support, and retreat. Wuxia Xianxia's speed was not slow to begin with. As an expert on the divine list with the best defense in the world, except for the attack power, he had almost no fatal shortcomings. In addition, he was familiar with the road, so when he rushed out of the Rekvia castle and fled down the mountain, Wuxia Xianxia had erased all traces he left behind. He charged forward. Run. All the way forward. After brushing shoulders with death and finally escaping, Wuxia Xianxia did not feel lucky at all. All he thought about was the future of the Jianghu family of South America. The trip to Eastern Europe was a complete failure, and 2 invincible realm experts died one after another. Although the comprehensive strength of the Jianghu family of South America was still there, without 2 invincible realm experts, it felt weak all of a sudden. This speed was simply too fast. Falling from the peak to the bottom in just one day. In the dense forest, Wuxia Xianxia, who was running madly, had a cold and venomous look in his eyes. He took out an instrument that looked like a pocket watch and glanced at it. After confirming the route, he continued forward. After tonight, the 3,000 elites of the Jianghu family of South America stationed in Wulan State were doomed to lose hope. With his crushing defeat, all the forces of the Jianghu family of South America outside Reki City would be devastated. However, things weren't as dire as they seemed. At least he still held the largest base of the Jianghu family of South America in Eastern Europe. They had advanced weapons and elite personnel. Although there weren't many of them, they were all loyal and useful people. 30 miles ahead, that base was the greatest hope for the Jianghu family of South America to turn the tables in Eastern Europe. Wuxia Xianxia took a deep breath and turned to look at the path behind him. Behind him, the wind and waves were calm, and only the sound of insects could be heard. However, clear footsteps suddenly sounded from Wuxia Xianxia's left side. Wuxia Xianxia, who was already frightened by the mere twang of a bowstring, suddenly turned around and stared at the dense forest on his left. The footsteps sounded unhurriedly. A tall and thin middle-aged man walked out of the forest. He was also holding a tracking device in his hand. He subconsciously shook his head. The deviation is more than 500 meters. It's a little ridiculous. He was a standard European white man, but he was speaking fluent Chinese at this time. Wuxia Xianxia looked at him for a while and suddenly felt that he looked familiar. Mr. Jiang, long time no see. The middle-aged man glanced at Wuxia Xianxia and suddenly laughed. Perhaps you have forgotten my name? But it doesn't matter. On such an occasion, I prefer to be called by my code name. Let me introduce myself. I'm a follower. Wuxia Xianxia had never heard of a follower, but he suddenly remembered the other's true identity. Second Elder Mellad. His voice was erratic and unpredictable. This is really surprising. The follower looked at him quietly and smiled without saying a word. But it's not difficult to understand. Rothschild and the Wang family of Beihai joined hands, so Li Tianlan naturally needed a powerful ally. What did he give you? The space in front of Wuxia Xianxia fluctuated faintly, like a breeze or a ripple. "Mr. Jiang, you can't do anything to me," the follower said unhurriedly. Jiang Qiansong narrowed his eyes, and the coldness in them became sharper. "Why? Now we are enemies." "Because my tracking device's route is off by 500 meters. This is too exaggerated." The follower laughed softly. At this moment, he was completely different from the second elder in the Holy Disarmament Corps. He was very soft, but there was a kind of twisted and weird evil in his voice. Jiang Qiansong froze for a moment, and his heart suddenly sank. When he escaped, the experts of the Vatican had not yet gone up the mountain. To some extent, Mel Lad in front of him was likely to be the one who chased after him. His route was off by about 500 meters, and the distance was bound to get farther and farther. But even so, when Jiang Qiansong was about to get close to the base, the other party could still catch up. What did this mean? This meant that the other party's speed was far better than his. Could it also be understood that the other party's strength was still above his? How could it be possible? "Mel Lad? And we are not enemies. As I said, I am a follower." Jiang Qiansong didn't know what the code name of follower meant, and he didn't bother to think about it. He just wanted to get back to the base as soon as possible. "Not enemies?" he sneered. "Well, it sounds true. Get out of the way, and we are not enemies." "At this time, I don't recommend you," the follower said. But his voice suddenly disappeared. His mouth was still moving, but the whole world seemed to have suddenly lost its voice and became extremely silent. A silent world. The sword of nothingness. The sword energy broke the space, and in an instant, it was like a storm. The whole space was twisted in the storm-like sword energy. Large tracts of trees were broken, wood chips were flying, and dust was flying. In the silence, the scene in front of him was like, the whole world was disintegrating and turning into nothingness. A sword edge appeared in the world of nothingness. The sword edge was like a beam of light, and in the blink of an eye, it directly arrived in front of the follower. All the words of the follower were forcibly suppressed by the sword energy. In the crazy whistling sword energy, the follower opened his hands and suddenly put them together. Crack. There was a slight crisp sound in the air. The huge force suddenly collided with the monstrous sword energy. The terrifying force turned into shock waves, sweeping in all directions. Jiang Qiansong dodged the strongest shock wave, and his face was a little gloomy. A figure dressed in black appeared in his line of sight. His whole body was wrapped in a black cloak, and it was completely impossible to tell his gender. He could only see a slightly chubby figure holding a sword and stabbing forward. His whole body was full of unparalleled sharpness. Jiang Qiansong had seen this figure before. Many people had seen him. But this was the most low-key invincible realm expert in the dark world. An invincible realm expert who should have died in the deep sea. Samsara Palace. The master of Samsara Palace. The follower was motionless. He put his hands together. The moment the two hands joined, he tightly clamped the long sword in the hand of the master of Samsara Palace. Jiang Qiansong hesitated for a moment. This should have been the most hidden way. Now it was known by the Vatican and the Samsara Palace. He already had doubts about the secrecy of that base. But he had no choice. That was the only chance for him to turn the tables in Eastern Europe. So he gritted his teeth, glanced at the follower and the master of Samsara Palace, and turned to leave. The follower seemed to want to say something. But the endless sword energy burst out in an instant. There was light in the dark forest. The huge power in the follower's hand swept through the sky like a tide. The famous sword in the hand of the master of Samsara Palace was broken in the collision with deity. Now the short sword was tightly clamped by the follower and suddenly twisted. In the clear cracking sound, the power like a mighty tide suddenly surged and drowned the whole battlefield. All the sword energy was completely washed away. The huge power hit the slightly chubby body of the master of Samsara Palace. Blood sputtered from his body. His whole body was sent flying nearly 50 meters away by the follower's blow, and he fell hard on the ground. Blood flowed down the black cloak. Her body moved and stood up very slowly. She reached out her hand. There was no sword in her hand. But as she reached out, a sword chime suddenly sounded between heaven and earth. The surging sword intent began to gather in her hand. The follower looked at all this and narrowed his eyes. He took 2 steps forward and said blandly, "I know the master of Samsara Palace is not dead." He stared at the figure in front of him and continued, "But you are not the master of Samsara Palace. Who are you?" Chapter 458. Gong Sun Chi was silent for a long time. The night wind in Eastern Europe, whether it was winter or summer, carried a bone-chilling chill. The night wind whistled past the top of the mountain, carrying the warmth of the human body and blowing far away. Some memories seemed to emerge at the end of the wind, becoming clearer and clearer. The person has been sent away. Is this what you mean by you have no choice? If you don't move forward, you'll fall back. If you don't move forward, you'll fall back. We don't need forgiveness. Oh, bullshit. How dare you? Kneel down. What? Are you ashamed of yourself? Do you really want to make everyone's life meaningless? There are many meanings in life. There were many meanings that were meaningless in the first place. I'm standing here, and we're standing at a high place. What's the point? Ridiculous. It's the truth. I'm disappointed. Only the truth will disappoint people. It makes sense. Just like you're my father, this is the truth. The most disappointing truth. Not anymore. I'll announce to the public that you're dead. You're going to leave here, change your identity, change your name, and change your origin. Wait for the right time. Maybe when the time comes, you'll find that everything today is meaningful. What else do you want? I can try my best to satisfy you. I want to see my daughter. Just to see? I thought you were going to take her away. Take her away? Ha. These are all the documents that belong to you. We've arranged the task of your unit, the executors, the search and rescue personnel, the emergency doctor, and the certificate to confirm your death. There's also the plastic surgeon, the new identity, the place of origin, and all kinds of records from childhood to adulthood. The information is more real than the real one. There will be no flaws. From now on, when you walk out of this door, you're not my son. Whether it's disappointing or ridiculous, just wait for the future. Then who am I? Who should I be? The new identity and the new name will be Chi. Gong Sun Chi suddenly came to his senses. The picture in his memory was warm and cold. The night sky in Eastern Europe was cold and warm. Qin Weibai was still standing in front of him, still bowing. Lin Fengting had already regained his composure. Gong Sun Chi didn't know how long he had been silent. He took a deep breath and looked at Qin Weibai, who looked calm in front of him. He nodded and said, "It really is Boss Qin. Third uncle, you flatter me." Qin Weibai smiled gently. "How did you know?" Gong Sun Chi forced himself to calm down. He never thought that his identity would be exposed by Qin Weibai. There was no powerful and glorious Gongsun family in Jianghu state. Therefore, Gong Sun Chi's surname was not Gongsun. He just raised his head. This matter was definitely a secret, not even his own brothers knew about it. Gong Sun Chi couldn't figure out how Qin Weibai learned about this. Qin Weibai thought for a moment. There were some things that were difficult for her to explain, so she could only say casually, "I just got the information by accident." Gong Sun Chi took a deep look at her and did not continue to dwell on this topic. He just calmly said, "Are you sure Jiang Qiansong will come here? This is his only choice." Qin Weibai said softly. Gong Sun Chi nodded. "But I also want to remind you that from the standpoint of the Jiang family of South America, he can cooperate with anyone. But he will not cooperate with Zhongzhou state. I represent Jianghu State, and there are not many things that I can talk to him about. But as long as he comes, Jianghu State is his. The only choice. Qin Weibai's tone was more certain. The Samsara Palace expanded quickly, but its foundation was unstable. Moreover, the news of the death of the master of Samsara Palace had spread throughout the dark world. The largest group of elites of the Samsara Palace in Eastern Europe had also been wiped out. The Lin clan was very strong, but it was unwilling to enter the secular world. So on this mountain tonight, there were 3 forces standing here, but only Gongsun Qi was qualified to talk to Jiang Qiansong. He might not represent Jianghu State, but the sound made by the Terracotta Army and the Snowdance Corps in Eastern Europe was the sound made by Jianghu State. As long as Jiang Qiansong escaped here tonight, facing Lin Fengding's sword, he could only choose to talk to Jianghu State. You seem to attach great importance to the Jiang family of South America? Lin Fengding suddenly asked. The hatred between the Jiang family of South America and the Samsara Palace was very deep. Especially since the final battle in Heaven Capital, the 2 superpowers had almost never coexisted peacefully in recent years. Jiang Qiansong's defense was very strong, but Lin Fengding would not believe that Qin Weibai, who only wanted to live, would rather give up the grudges between the 2 superpowers and rely on Jiang Qiansong's defense, or even waste such a cautious battle here. Qin Weibai hesitated. I need the Jiang family of South America to provide me with something. A list? Lin Fengding narrowed his eyes. How could they have it? It's a kind of liquid metal. Qin Weibai said slowly, at present, the Jiang family of South America's research and development of that metal should still be in the breakthrough stage. I have a formula in my hand that can speed up the research progress of that metal. If the situation is optimistic, as long as we get this metal, it will be a crucial trump card in the final battle. Lin Fengding frowned. Qin Weibai glanced at him and suddenly said, Are you willing to face the devil troop of the Wang family of Beihai without any defensive equipment? He had to fight against the devil troop without any defense. It wasn't that Lin Fengding couldn't bear it. But even if he could, he didn't want to. However, Lin Fengding still felt a little uncomfortable when he heard this. The Jiang family of South America was indeed unrivaled in the development technology of individual defensive equipment. But the Lin clan was not a good-for-nothing who couldn't produce similar equipment. As long as Lin Fengding wanted, the equipment he wore could be equally luxurious. The Lin clan also has its own technology. Lin Fengding said calmly. But it's never a bad thing to have better ones. Qin Weibai looked at the mountains under the night sky in the distance and said lightly, and the Jiang family of South America has more than those technologies. Their resources are equally important. The situation has come to this point today, and I can't predict the outcome. It's never a bad thing to be more prepared. Our opponents are very strong, and our allies have ulterior motives. Under such circumstances, even a little bit of power is not enough for me. Not to mention Jiang Qiansong and the Jiang family of South America. I don't understand. Gongsun Qi came over. You are Li Tianlan's woman, and everything you do is for him. But what good is it for Li Tianlan to lead the situation to this point today? Boss Qin, I have a question for you. Do you know why the Wang family of Beihai's killing intent against Li Tianlan is getting stronger and stronger? 3 reasons. Qin Weibai glanced at him, and there was an inexplicable smile in her bright and dreamy eyes. First, Tianlan's identity is there. The Li family he carries is destined not to stand side by side with the Wang family of Beihai. Second, Tianlan's aptitude is there. If the Wang family of Beihai doesn't take action, Tianlan is destined to be a big problem for them in the future. This is indeed the reason. Gongsun Qi nodded and looked at Qin Weibai. But this is not the most important thing. With Jianghu State mediating, some contradictions may not necessarily be life or death. The most important thing is naturally because of my existence. Qin Weibai chuckled and suddenly asked, Are you afraid of me? The question was abrupt and extremely arrogant. But Gongsun Qi was not angry. He thought about it seriously and said cautiously, I can't see through you. Wang Tianzong can't see through me either. Qin Weibai Bai Pingjing said, a woman he can't see through is with Tianlan. According to Wang Tianzong's character, he is bound to kill her as soon as possible, because he will not let go of anyone who may pose a hard threat to the future of the Wang family of Beihai. So, with all due respect, I personally think that Boss Qin has been between Li Tianlan and the Wang family of Beihai. Gong Sun Qi paused. Picking a fight? Qin Weibai smiled and said what Gong Sun Qi wanted to say but didn't say. Gong Sun Qi was silent and acquiesced. Qin Weibai's eyes gradually became cold. She slowly turned around, restrained her expression, and looked down the mountain. Her whole person seemed to gradually become an ice sculpture exuding a delicate fragrance but without any temperature. She was silent for a long time, and then whispered, "What do you know?" "At least I understand Li Tianlan's current situation. The Wang family of Beihai wanted to kill him. Kunlun City wanted to kill him. The country was not peaceful. Now, with the outbreak of chaos in Eastern Europe, the whole dark world was not peaceful. Li Tianlan was growing, but after tonight, he would occupy Eastern Europe, and the whole dark world would want his life. His situation will become unprecedentedly dangerous. Boss Qin, do you think Li Tianlan can be like a fish in water in such a cruel environment?" Gong Sun Qi asked. "I can't." Qin Weibai shook her head. Gong Sun Qi's eyes became extremely sharp in an instant. "Then why would you rather destroy the Samsara Palace to create the current chaos?" "Because of what you said. In such an environment, Tianlan can't be like a fish in water. It's even difficult for him to survive." Qin Weibai said softly, "This era is too cruel. That's why a new era is needed." "So what?" Gong Sun Qi sneered and said, "There are enemies everywhere. What's the difference between a new era and an old era? In the new era, Tianlan is the chosen one. Isn't this difference big enough?" Qin Weibai asked. "Geniuses are indeed very strong, but nothing is absolute in this world." Gong Sun Qi shook his head. Qin Weibai suddenly fell silent. Just when Gong Sun Qi thought she had nothing to say, she asked, "In your opinion, what is invincible?" Lin Fengting and Gong Sun Qi frowned at the same time. This was a big question. So neither of them answered. The invincible realm is invincible. The real invincible is perfect in terms of your martial arts. Perfection doesn't have any flaws. Only those who are perfect and without flaws are the chosen one. There are two sayings in the dark world. Based on the martial arts of the Li family and the Wang family of Beihai, there will be reality and illusion in the end. Light and darkness. That is the so-called road of the chosen one. But many people actually forget that the person who pointed out these two roads has never seen the real chosen one himself. Gong Sun Qi and Lin Fengting looked at each other, and neither of them spoke. Only Qin Weibai's cold but sweet voice echoed in the mountain wind. How ridiculous it is for people who have never seen the chosen one to talk about the chosen one. Since it is already perfect without flaws, then what is the difference between reality and illusion, light and darkness in the end? The real chosen one is the strongest in all aspects, so the sword intent of reality and illusion can alternate day and night in the end. The sword of day and night can also break the sky and the sea in the end. In front of the chosen one, martial arts is martial arts. As for those who regard those two roads as the truth, they can only be close to the level of the chosen one. Qin Weibai turned to look at Lin Fengting and Gong Sun Qi, and whispered, "Tianlan is the chosen one, but do you know what the chosen one is? Invincible in the world, absolute domination. In my opinion, the real chosen one is the one who can overturn the whole dark world alone. In the era of the chosen one, no one can kill the chosen one, no lineup, no method." Lin Fengting suddenly glanced at Qin Weibai, thinking that since no method could kill the chosen one, what about Dongqing Huangtu? Qin Weibai noticed Lin Fengting's gaze. She seemed to think of something and turned her head slightly. She whispered, "Unless he wants to die." Chapter 459. At 9 o'clock at night. The starry sky of Eastern Europe was getting lonelier. The cold moon dyed the night with a layer of pale white. On the quiet top of the mountain, Lin Fengting smoked and looked at the direction of the base of the Jianghu family of South America against the wind. Gong Sun Qi stood on the other side with a frown, thinking about the new era that Qin Weibai mentioned and the position of Jianghu state in the so-called new era. Without flaming fire by her side, Qin Weibai carried a delicate backpack in her hand. She opened the backpack and took out a thermos flask. She took a sip of warm water and remained silent. Standpoint had always been a very complicated thing. Only with people would there be a standpoint, and with a standpoint, there would be politics, and with politics, there would be benefits. Benefits were placed in the most central position, and everyone around benefits had different directions. However, there was more than just profit in the world. And the future, the present, and the past. The world was like the shape of a pyramid. It was quiet, and the higher it was, the quieter it was. There were fewer places, and there were fewer people. The small number of people at the very top were enemies and entangled with each other. In the end, it all turned into grudges. The entanglement of gratitude and grudges had resulted in the current complicated and treacherous world. Lin Fengting thought about the future of the Lin clan and the past of the Wang family of Beihai. If the chaos in Eastern Europe was destined to be the starting point for the Lin clan and the Wang family of Beihai to part ways, then Qin Weibai's participation was bound to bring great changes to the future of the Lin clan that could not be concealed. With Qin Weibai, the Lin clan was destined to get closer to the Li family and Li Tianlan than ever before. In Qin Weibai's new era, Li Tianlan and the Li family were the focus of dispute. How could the Lin clan hide from the world then? What about the friendship with the Wang family of Beihai for hundreds of years? These were all questions that Lin Fengting needed to consider. Gong Sun Qi's thoughts were equally complicated. If there was really a new era after the chaos in Eastern Europe, it would undoubtedly be beneficial to Li Tianlan, but the interests of Jianghu state would certainly be damaged to varying degrees. Gong Sun Qi was the leader of the Terracotta Army and a neutral force in Jianghu state. However, he could only remain neutral when his surname was Gong Sun. If he changed his surname, how could he remain neutral? Jianghu state was a country. It was once home. Now it was Li Tianlan. He was in the middle. Qin Weibai's third uncle connected everything together. Family, country, and individual. Gong Sun Qi stood in the center and also had to consider what to do. The mountain wind became more and more piercingly cold. As it blew past the mountain peak, a shrill whistling sound could be heard. Gong Sun Qi took a deep breath and glanced at Qin Weibai. The word third uncle came out of her mouth. What kind of glory was that? How heavy was that? Qin Weibai did not notice Gong Sun Qi's gaze. Lin Fengting was thinking about the friendship between the Lin clan and the Wang family of Beihai. Gong Sun Qi was thinking about his country. Qin Weibai just thought about Li Tianlan quietly. The wind blew her long hair and the scarf around her neck. Her natural and rich body fragrance filled the entire lightning city along with the wind. Qin Weibai's eyes were a little blurred, a little joyful, and a little happy. At this moment, all the dangers, conspiracies, deceptions, and bloodshed seemed to be far away from her. It had been the 13th day since he left Lin and for Eastern Europe. A day felt like a year. She really missed him. She wanted to be with him. She wanted to be with him. The mountain wind was chilly. The corners of her eyes and brows were filled with affection and gentleness as she held the thermos flask in her hand. So warm. The sound of a text message notification rang out. Qin Weibai took out her mobile phone and looked at it. The mobile phone wallpaper that she had used for 3 years was still the photo of her and Li Tianlan snuggling up in the dormitory of the Sky Academy. A simple text message blocked her face. His Highness Li Tianlan has arrived at the office of the president. The overall situation is settled. Qin Weibai looked at the text message in her hand quietly. The tenderness and lovesickness in her eyes gradually faded, becoming calm, clear, and indifferent. In an instant, her entire temperament underwent a drastic change. Gong Sun Qi and Lin Fengting turned around at the same time. Qin Weibai stood up. Tianlan has succeeded. Qin Weibai looked at Lin Fengting and Gong Sun Qi. Her voice was very soft, but an unimaginably strong aura suddenly diffused from her. Confident, calm, cold, and proud. High and mighty. Lin Fengting and Gong Sun Qi involuntarily shifted their eyes. The night was still dark. But Qin Weibai, standing in the night, seemed to suddenly become extremely dazzling. Lin Fengting laughed at himself. Maybe he didn't want to admit it. But in this world, some people, no matter where they came from, were indeed born to be high and overlook everything. For example, Qin Weibai. Similarly, some people were born to climb and struggle in the dark abyss. For example, Li Tianlan. She and he were close to each other. They were up and down, front and back. It was like heaven and earth were slowly merging. When they really faced each other, a new world would inevitably be born. And a new era. What's next? Lin Fengting asked. Next, it's our business. Qin Weibai said softly, those who are guilty should be tried. The voice of this sentence was also very soft. But when he heard this sentence, Gong Sun Qi clearly felt the coldness of the surrounding air, as if the whole surrounding mountain area had become extremely gloomy. In one day, 3 invincible realm experts died. Next, it was Qin Weibai's trial of the entire dark world. Isn't it a little too hasty? Lin Fengting and Gong Sun Qi asked at the same time. As soon as the words came out, the two of them finally looked at each other for the first time tonight. Why is it hasty? Qin Weibai glanced at the two of them. Gong Sun Qi was silent. But Lin Fengting, who knew Qin Weibai, suddenly felt an extremely heavy pressure. Perhaps except for himself, including the members of the major branches of the Lin clan, no one knew why he made Qin Weibai the acting patriarch of the Lin clan. It was not because he wanted to use the Lin clan to help Qin Weibai, at least not entirely. At least in Lin Fengting's heart, he made Qin Weibai the patriarch of the Lin clan because he wanted Qin Weibai to help the Lin clan. As for the reason? Because some people were born to be superior. I can't grasp Tianzong's state now. Lin Fengting told the truth. Lin Fengting still had no clear image information about what happened in front of the Rekvia castle. Some written information could not help him judge Wang Tianzong's current state. When martial arts reached the level of him and Wang Tianzong, a slight mistake in judgment might lead to a completely different ending. What's more, Wang Tianzong had broken through again. Lin Fengting was no longer his opponent. At this time, his judgment could not be wrong. He couldn't grasp Wang Tianzong's state now. He believed that Qin Weibai couldn't grasp it either. Wang Tianzong's breakthrough was an accident for each of them. It was the biggest accident. At least for now, it seems that no one in the dark world can grasp Wang Tianzong's state. Qin Weibai said quietly, since we can't grasp it, we might as well imagine him as the strongest. He is the strongest now. Lin Fengting raised his eyebrows. Qin Weibai nodded and said, yes, he is indeed the strongest in the dark world, but not in martial arts. Now Wang Tianzong was indeed invincible in the world. But above the half-step chosen one, there was indeed a real chosen one. Perhaps such a chosen one did not exist now. But the meaning of the word chosen one in martial arts did exist. Wang Tianzong was not the strongest in martial arts. But Qin Weibai was willing to imagine him as the strongest. It was not just to increase the pressure on them. Lin Fengting's eyes flickered, and his voice became dignified involuntarily. His voice was very slow, which seemed to make the night sky tremble slightly. Do you mean that Tianzong will take the last step in Eastern Europe? Qin Weibai was silent for a long time. Wang Tianzong was now a half-step chosen one. The last step was naturally the real chosen one. A chosen one who could overturn the entire dark world alone. Lin Fengting stared at Qin Weibai closely, waiting for her answer. After a long time, Qin Weibai nodded and said, "He will." Lin Fengting's body shook, and he said in a hoarse voice, "Your speculation?" "It's more than speculation." Qin Weibai shook her head. Lin Fengting suddenly didn't know what to feel. Qin Weibai's answer was more than speculation. It was basically infinitely close to the truth. Wang Tianzong. Would he make a complete breakthrough in the chaos in Eastern Europe? He was in his 50s this year. It was already a miracle for him to break through from the peak of the invincible realm to a half-step chosen one. Would he break through again? Lin Fengting was in a trance. When he recalled Wang Tianzong's face again, he actually felt a little absent-minded. At this moment, he finally remembered when they were young. Summer Solstice, who was extremely talented and was considered by Senior Li, Senior Wang, and Senior Lin to be the chosen one. She was the first of the four to break through the invincible realm, and her talent was the first. But in the end, she destroyed her foundation as the chosen one for the Wang family of Beihai. Li Guangtu, who was extremely paranoid and never retreated, also had the potential to reach the peak of swordsmanship. But in the end, he lost his blood in a case of treason. He was lazy and ignorant. He followed his heart and cultivated his mind all the way to the peak of the invincible realm. What about Wang Tianzong? Lin Fengting suddenly found that at this moment, he couldn't remember what Wang Tianzong looked like when he was young. Among the four of them, Wang Tianzong was the eldest. But at that time, Wang Tianzong didn't have the so-called king's temperament, and his talent was not the most outstanding. Among the four of them, he broke through the invincible realm the latest. He was the eldest just because he was the oldest. In Lin Fengting's impression, Wang Tianzong seemed to have always been silent. In the past, when they gathered together, he always quietly watched them play, quietly cultivate, quietly fall in love, and quietly break through. Everything was silent. It wasn't that he could keep a low profile. It was that among the four of them, Wang Tianzong seemed to be the least noticeable one. Summer Solstice, Li Guangtu, Lin Fengting, and Wang Tianzong. These were the four people in the past. The four people standing together were enough to sweep the world. Now looking back, the most talented one destroyed his foundation, the most serious and paranoid one became a sinner, the idle and casual one was still idle and casual, but Wang Tianzong, who had been silent, became the sword emperor of Zhongzhou state and the first on the divine list. Now, he even began to take steps toward the chosen one. The past years were like a long river, constantly recalling in Lin Fengting's ears, setting off huge waves. Lin Fengting didn't feel jealous. He had gradually forgotten what Wang Tianzong looked like when he was young. But in retrospect, everything about Wang Tianzong now seemed to be what he deserved. The chosen one, Lin Fengting murmured to himself. How elegant was the chosen one who overturned the entire dark world. Lin Fengting knew that he was invincible. But this chosen one, who should have been invincible, was not really invincible now. At least in the Samsara Palace, there was a sword stroke of the chosen one in his peak state. Was it the extremely sharp and unparalleled reality and illusion? Or was it the light and darkness that alternated between day and night? It turns out that in the end, this game in Eastern Europe is the battlefield between the Samsara Palace and the Wang family of Beihai. Lin Fengting smiled in a complicated tone. The battlefield is everyone's battlefield. Qin Weibai whispered, no matter how strong Wang Tianzong is, he has to face the sword stroke of the Samsara Palace. And in such a huge battlefield, everyone will have their own position. Naturally, you also have your position. So I didn't ask you to go to Reki City. If possible, I don't even want you to take action until the final battle. Lin Fengting narrowed his eyes. Vaguely, he seemed to understand what Qin Weibai meant. You want me to build up strength for myself? In the chaotic general trend, he didn't take action. There was no doubt that he wanted to keep himself in the peak state and build up strength for the peak sword stroke. But the chosen one was the chosen one. No matter how strong he was only at the peak of the invincible realm. You can understand it that way. Qin Weibai said, strictly speaking, before the final battle, I want to ask you to hide a sword stroke. Chapter 460. The night was still dark. But the atmosphere on the top of the mountain was getting more and more solemn. The Chosen One. This was a word that could suppress the entire dark world and make it hard for them to breathe. When this word was combined with the Wang family of Beihai with a long history, it was a complete nightmare, enough to make everyone tremble from the soul. Lin Fengting glanced at Qin Weibai again. Qin Weibai stood there quietly, her eyes calm, but a very affirmative light was overflowing from her eyes, making her look very determined. Lin Fengting nodded silently. He stood beside Qin Weibai now, so he would believe her. Qin Weibai said that Wang Tianzong would break through. Then he would definitely break through. Therefore, the Wang family of Beihai with the Chosen One would be very terrible. And the Chosen One with the support of the Wang family of Beihai would be even more terrible. It's incredible, Lin Fengting sighed softly, looked at Qin Weibai, and suddenly said with a chuckle, "You don't seem to be worried?" "I don't accept it," Qin Weibai said softly. Lin Fengting was slightly stunned, and then he understood what Qin Weibai meant. Qin Weibai was not worried. She only refused to accept it. It's useless to worry. I can't stop Wang Tianzong. If I deal with him now, other aspects will be out of control. Wang Tianzong is very strong, but he is not the overall situation. In the overall situation, everyone is the overall situation. The only thing I can do is to drag Wang Tianzong to the end. Before that, I need to clean up some other variables first. So I want to ask you to hide a sword. Qin Weibai further explained. What about me? Gong Sun Chi suddenly asked, Boss Qin, you called me here tonight, not just to let me talk with Jiang Qiansong, right? Of course. Qin Weibai nodded. But I don't need you to do anything here. If possible, I hope that the Terracotta Army can support Tianlan at some critical moments in the next few days. Gong Sun Chi narrowed his eyes and looked at Qin Weibai. Qin Weibai looked at him calmly. The Terracotta Army must be neutral. Gong Sun Chi said expressionlessly, this is the principle. The Terracotta Army is indeed a neutral force. But third uncle is not. Qin Weibai emphasized this extremely secretive title. Gong Sun Chi was about to speak, but he suddenly thought of something and looked at Qin Weibai thoughtfully. He smiled, and his eyes were playful. I'm your third uncle? Qin Weibai's face was cold. She said calmly, aren't you? I have a question. Gong Sun Chi said, if you can give me an answer, I can agree to your request. Ask. Qin Weibai said. Gong Sun Chi was silent for a while. Then he said in a hoarse voice, it is said that the intelligence system of the Samsara Palace is unparalleled in the world. Does the Samsara Palace know who cut off my path to the invincible realm? Gong Sun Chi was the strongest expert of the invincible realm in the dark world. He was also the strongest superior of the half-step invincible realm. In his current state, he couldn't be regarded as not having broken through to the invincible realm, nor could he be regarded as a complete invincible realm expert. In some ways, he should be regarded as an invincible realm expert whose foundation had been damaged. In this state, Gong Sun Chi was extremely terrifying. Even the real invincible realm experts at the bottom of the holy list were no match for him. But his biggest weakness was that his foundation had been damaged. His strength was still there, but his physical strength and explosive power were always a little weaker than those of the real invincible realm experts. He was plotted against at the critical moment of his breakthrough. That kind of vicious attack completely destroyed all his hopes, making it impossible for him to enter the invincible realm in this life. This was a blood feud for Gong Sun Chi. The whole Zhongzhou state was also furious. It was just that some things had been investigated for many years, but there was no clue. But the Samsara Palace was different. Their intelligence ability had almost been recognized by the whole dark world. Qin Weibai could even find out his identity. Gong Sun Chi believed that as long as the Samsara Palace investigated this matter, they would definitely find some clues. I investigated this matter. Qin Weibai suddenly said, whether you believe it or not, the Samsara Palace also spent a lot of resources to investigate this matter, but Gong Sun Chi raised his eyebrows, but his heart sank. I'm not sure. Qin Weibai suddenly said, her voice suddenly paused. Not only her voice, but Qin Weibai's whole body stiffened for a moment. She seemed to think of something, and her eyes fluctuated violently for a moment. Then she slowly shook her head as if she felt that it was impossible. Countless pieces of information were constantly gathered in her mind, sorted out, analyzed, filtered, and gathered again. In an instant, Qin Weibai's mind seemed to be stirred up by a storm. She frowned slightly, and her whole person looked with a kind of almost frozen indifference and seriousness. She suddenly glanced at Gong Sun Chi and did not speak. Do you have any clues? Gong Sun Chi suddenly took a step forward and asked excitedly. I'm not sure. Qin Weibai shook her head slowly and repeated her answer again. What on earth do you think of? Gong Sun Chi looked at Qin Weibai seriously. I'm just wondering if a certain rat has been hiding in the dark has something to do with your matter. Qin Weibai said calmly, Uncle, how can this matter be so easy to investigate? I can only give you a direction at most. If you really want to find the mastermind, you have to pay more attention to this person, but you can't touch him. Who? Gong Sun Chi raised his eyebrows and said in a deep voice. Your colleague. Qin Weibai was calm and composed. Colleague? Gong Sun Chi murmured to himself, and then asked in a tone that even he didn't believe, It's another one. Qin Weibai said. Gong Sun Chi had 3 colleagues. One was General Yi of 9th Heaven, codenamed Vermilion Bird. One was General Shang of 9 Serenities, codenamed White Tiger. One was Lieutenant General Li Wangxing of 9 Regions, codenamed Black Tortoise. However, Black Tortoise had just joined the Terracotta Army in recent years. He was more like a junior than a colleague in front of the 3 seniors. Qin Weibai was not talking about Yi, but another one. Shang? Gong Sun Chi asked, and his voice suddenly became much heavier. Qin Weibai was silent. Gong Sun Chi didn't say anything for a long time. After a long time, he took a deep look at Qin Weibai and said, Thank you. I hope you won't forget what you promised me, Uncle. Qin Weibai's tone was quiet and soft, like a real junior. I will try my best, but I can't guarantee anything. The chosen one battlefield, Gong Sun Chi laughed at himself. In the chaos of Eastern Europe, Lin Fengting needed to hide a sword. Even if his sword couldn't reverse everything, it was bound to be one of the most important swords in the entire chaos. But Gong Sun Chi himself, if he could break through smoothly in the past, he should be qualified to hide a sword now. But now, with the reputation of being the strongest expert in the half-step invincible realm, in the chosen one battlefield, he didn't even have the qualification to guarantee anything, let alone hide a sword. In fact, you two don't have to worry too much. Qin Weibai said, Wang Tianzong's breakthrough is destined, but he doesn't have enough luck. Even if he breaks through, there is nothing to be afraid of. Not enough luck? Gong Sun Chi asked in an interrogative tone. Lin Fengting also felt that this sentence was a little ridiculous. Wang Tianzong controlled the Wang family of Beihai. If his luck was not enough, didn't it mean that the Wang family of Beihai's luck was not enough? In the hundreds of years of the Dark World, the Wang family of Beihai's luck was like a dragon, and its momentum was like the sun at noon. Who dared to say that the Wang family of Beihai's luck was not enough? I remember Master Xian Xuanzi said that in the past 500 years, the luck of the Wang family of Beihai was the most prosperous at this time. Gong Sun Chi said slowly. If it weren't for this, Tianzong probably wouldn't have been able to take that step. Lin Fengting agreed with this statement. But Qin Weibai disagreed. Xian Xuanzi? She chuckled. The smile was not contemptuous, but it was indescribably arrogant, with a kind of naked disdain. You don't believe in metaphysics or fate? Gong Sun Chi asked. I do. Qin Weibai said softly. There was a faint but genuine reverence in her voice. Perhaps in the dark world, only flaming fire, who was closest to her, knew that Qin Weibai, who was raised by a monk, was a very devout believer of the new stream and also believed in God. She had faith. She just didn't believe in people. I believe that fate and metaphysics have their reasons, but can the so-called metaphysics grandmasters really be trusted? Qin Weibai asked. Gong Sun Qi frowned. Many of the things the master said have actually been proved. Qin Weibai said, then I'll say a few things. In 10 years at most, uncle, you will die in Jianghu state and become a stepping stone for Tianlan to break through to the invincible realm. In 10 years at most, uncle, you will die in Beihai and become a stepping stone for Wang Xingxiao to break through to the invincible realm. In 10 years at most, uncle, you will die in Kunlun and become a stepping stone for Gu Hanshan to break through to the invincible realm. Gong Sun Qi was speechless. If it weren't for Qin Weibai, a beautiful woman, in front of him, he really wanted to scold her. What is this? He asked in a deep voice. This is metaphysics, and it can also be said to be prophecy. Qin Weibai said blandly, even if it's not in the intelligence of Jianghu state, don't you have channels to know it? I'm the adopted daughter of great master Wu Wei. His cultivation is higher than Xian Xuanzi's, right? What I said before are all prophecies. I can give you whichever result you want. The 3 prophecies were all about falling and death. The locations were Beihai and Kunlun in Jianghu state. Gong Sun Qi suddenly felt that he was choosing a cemetery for himself. Jianghu state was too big, and the location was uncertain. Kunlun was too cold, and it was a world of ice and snow. It was boring. The scenery of Beihai was good, and the landscape was picturesque. But what the hell does it have to do with me? Gong Sun Qi glanced at Qin Weibai, coughed dryly, and asked hesitantly, well, can I live? He believed it. Lin Fengting held back his laughter and turned his head. He didn't want to see the low IQ of the dignified azure dragon of Jianghu state. There was also a smile in Qin Weibai's eyes. I don't believe you. Gong Sun Qi said in a deep voice, I believe in great master Wu Wei. Don't you understand? Qin Weibai said softly, metaphysics and fate do have their own truth. A real metaphysics grandmaster can indeed see some things, even predict some things, resolve some tribulations in fate, and change one's destiny. But what kind of cultivation do you think can predict a person's future completely and accurately? She even knew when he would achieve something in the future. Is such a person still a metaphysics grandmaster? Such an ability is comparable to that of ghosts and gods. The Lin clan also has its own metaphysics grandmaster. For many years, he has predicted the future of the Lin clan and condensed fate. Mr. Lin, when did the metaphysics grandmaster of the Lin clan accurately predict something for someone in the Lin clan and realize it? Lin Fengting coughed awkwardly. A few times, but those are special circumstances. He suddenly froze, as if he understood something. Qin Weibai also laughed. Special circumstances. These 4 words are the key to all the accurate predictions of the metaphysics grandmaster. What do you want to say? Gong Sun Qi took a deep breath and said slowly. What she wants to say is that metaphysics is magical, but 2 accurate predictions often represent a certain position. Lin Fengting thought of the past predictions of Lin Su of the Lin clan and sighed. Gong Sun Qi still didn't understand. Qin Weibai simply made it clearer. Uncle, do you know what Great Master Wu Wei's greatest achievement was? Great Master Wu Wei had instructed many people in his life, and they were all extremely accurate. But his greatest achievement, Sai City. Gong Sun Qi said. Many years ago, it was Great Master Wu Wei who persuaded Situ Tsangyue to go to Mount Taibai in Jianghu state. So Situ Tsangyue got rid of the influence of the Li family's treason case and finally established Sai City. But in fact, Great Master Wu Wei could only be sure that there were opportunities in the north, but he couldn't be sure what the north meant to Situ Tsangyue. Qin Weibai said, I'm sure that you will die, because people will die, but I'm not sure how you will die in the end. So it needs external forces. Today, I prophesied that you would die in the North Sea. I can't do that, but I need to borrow the help of external forces to push some things forward and finally make you die in the North Sea. This way, my prophecy will be a success. Metaphysics grandmasters do exist. However, a superpower that can push everything together with a metaphysics grandmaster is a metaphysics grandmaster that can accurately predict the future. Don't you understand? My foster father is respected as a god because the Li family helped him push a lot of things behind the scenes, which eventually led to some results. Xianxia is called a grandmaster, and there are also forces behind him pushing some results. That's the true face of metaphysics. He said that the Wang family of Beihai has the most luck now, so there will be a lot of tricks behind it. I'm not interested in knowing these. The only thing I know is that Wang Tianzong has enough luck now. Even if the Wang family of Beihai has the most luck, that luck may not belong to Wang Tianzong. Lin Fengting was about to speak when he suddenly looked up at the night sky in the distance. The night sky was silent. Qin Weibai turned her head and looked back. In just a few seconds, Gong Sun Chi had been keenly aware of the changes in the wind around him. All the wind came from the front, and the space was shaking slightly. It seemed that something was moving fast in the night. Lin Fengting took a step forward calmly. A sword intent emanated from his body and kept circling with the wind. Vaguely, a figure seemed to appear in the distance in the sight of the three. The figure was extremely fast and rushed over without stopping. A light flashed in Qin Weibai's eyes. At this moment, she could see Jiang Qiansong. But standing in Lin Fengting's sword intent, even if Jiang Qiansong was an expert on the divine list, he could not see them in a panic. Jiang Qiansong's figure appeared at the foot of the mountain. He rushed forward. He went straight to the mountainside. Finally, he rushed to the top of the mountain. There was nothing in his sight, so he walked into Lin Fengting's sword intent in a daze. A piercingly cold wind suddenly howled and blew. Under the night sky, a thick tornado with a height of hundreds of meters suddenly appeared on the top of the mountain. Jiang Qiansong's figure suddenly froze in place. Lin Fengting, Gong Sun Chi, and Qin Weibai stood around him. The majestic sword energy kept whistling around the four of them. Mr. Jiang? Lin Fengting laughed. What a coincidence. Jiang Qiansong's face was pale, and his heart sank to the bottom in an instant, as if falling into the abyss. At this moment, he remembered what his follower had said, but it was too late to regret it. I'm afraid it's not a coincidence, is it? Jiang Qiansong took a deep breath and sneered. Indeed not. Qin Weibai said, We're waiting for you here. Waiting for me? Jiang Qiansong's tone became colder. What are you waiting for? Are you going to invite me to tea? I'm here to give you two choices. Qin Weibai looked at Jiang Qiansong and said calmly, Do you choose to surrender or die? Chapter 461. No one was willing to surrender, and no one would be willing to die. This was especially true for the big shots in high positions. So these two choices were not choices. For Jiang Qiansong, who had stepped into Lin Fengting's sword intent, this was no longer a matter of choice. He had no choice at all. As the patriarch of the Jiang family of South America, it was unacceptable to lose his freedom or his life. Jiang Qiansong's face changed. When he met the follower, he had already vaguely noticed that something was wrong. However, the largest underground base of the Jiang family of South America and Eastern Europe was extremely hidden, and all of it was built by loyal and reliable men of sacrifice. When the Polar Ground Alliance was strong and the Jiang family of South America and Rekvia cooperated happily, the important figures of the Jiang family of South America hardly came here a few times. It could be said that there was no clue at all. Jiang Qiansong was confident that the follower did not know the specific location here. He was confident that no one could know here. He was full of confidence, but he stepped into an extremely deadly trap and encirclement on the way he had to pass. Jiang Qiansong's heart was suddenly in a mess, and he vaguely felt that even the cold wind blowing at night was extremely bitter. The Jiang family of South America was not going well today. All kinds of setbacks could even be said to be the day with the heaviest losses in recent decades. What was even more depressing was that Jiang Qiansong still did not know what was going on. How did you know here? Jiang Qiansong asked with a gloomy face. Now in retrospect, the follower seemed to have advised him not to come here. What did this mean? It meant that not only the follower knew this place, but the other party even knew that Qin Weibai and the others would also appear here. But at that time, his words were interrupted by the master of Samsara Palace. And even if he finished, Jiang Qiansong could not believe it with his mentality at that time. Jiang Qiansong silently observed the three people around him. He took a look at Lin Fengting and gave up all his thoughts. Once such an expert at the peak of the invincible realm used his sword with all his strength, the sword energy would be like the vast sea. Jiang Qiansong was famous for his defense, but it was not absolute. At least with his power, he could not afford to provoke such an expert, let alone break through. Gongsun Qi. This general of Jianghu state, who was known as the strongest invincible realm combat capability, was also difficult to deal with. Jiang Qiansong could not kill Gongsun Qi in an instant. If he wanted to break through and escape, he would almost fail if he could not kill Gongsun Qi in an instant. Jiang Qiansong glanced at Qin Weibai out of the corner of his eye. Qin Weibai stood there quietly, elegant and cold, seemingly defenseless. Jiang Qiansong's eyes suddenly became twisted and filled with hatred. It's you, right? You know this place? The Lin clan did not enter the secular world. Although the major branches were domineering, they were not unreasonable. There was no irreconcilable grievance between the Jiang family of South America and the Lin clan. It was just normal friction. He did not believe that the Lin clan would investigate the major bases of the Jiang family of South America so carefully. As for the Jiang family of South America and Jianghu state, it could be said that there were constant conflicts. If Gongsun Qi could find this place, this base would not have survived until today. It would have been wiped out by the Arctic Ocean Command. Only the Samsara Palace. Moreover, the intelligence system of Samsara Palace was unparalleled in the world. Sometimes, it seemed that their intelligence system was like a dark hand that quietly reached into the superpowers to obtain intelligence, stir up the situation, and even had the intention of turning the world upside down. Among the three people in front, Qin Weibai was the one who was most likely to find this place. Is that important? Qin Weibai asked in a flat tone. She stood within Lin Fengting's sword intent, less than 10 meters away from Jiang Qiansong, but Jiang Qiansong did not dare to make a move. He took a deep breath and closed his eyes. When he opened them again, his expression had become extremely sincere. We can talk, he said seriously. Qin Weibai lowered her head and thought. When she was silent, Lin Fengting and Gongsun Qi were also silent, with no intention of speaking at all. Jiang Qiansong's heart kept sinking. The three people who blocked him tonight had their own backgrounds. They represented Samsara Palace, the Lin clan, and Jianghu state. It seemed that the woman in front of him was the leader of the three. Jiang Qiansong pursed his lips. Samsara Palace and the Jiang family of South America had been fighting in every corner of the Dark World for the past 3 years. As the patriarch of the Jiang family of South America, supported by the strong foundation of the Jiang family of South America, he was still at a disadvantage in the battle with Samsara Palace, which had almost no foundation. Jiang Qiansong naturally understood how difficult it was to deal with the young but perfect woman in front of him. But now that he was forced to this point, he really had no room to resist. There are still 2 choices. Qin Weibai finally said, "Are you buying your life? Or buying your freedom?" "I want both," Jiang Qiansong said in a deep voice. His words were very domineering. Qin Weibai chuckled and said calmly, "You can't afford it." Jiang Qiansong did not speak, but his eyes were extremely determined. Qin Weibai smiled and offered her price. A human head. As long as Jiang Guochu's head is here, freedom and life are all yours. Bitch, what did you say? Jiang Qiansong suddenly roared. He really did not expect that the so-called price Qin Weibai offered would be so outrageous. Jiang Guochu. the only heir of the Jiang family of South America, Jiang Qinsong's biological son. Jiang Guochu, who was only in his early 30s this year, could be said to be the most qualified genius of the Jiang family of South America in the past 200 years. Now his combat capability of the invincible realm could fully prove his talent. More importantly, Jiang Guochu had already found his way to the invincible realm. In other words, now as long as he wanted to do it, he could break through the invincible realm at any time. No one doubted his qualification and potential. Everyone in the Jiang family of South America believed that Jiang Guochu could become an expert at the peak of the invincible realm at the age of 40, or at least infinitely close to this realm. What did this mean? Jiang Qinsong himself was not at the peak of the invincible realm, and he could not even get close to it. This was the future hope of the Jiang family of South America. Qin Weibai wanted his head, which was equivalent to destroying the Jiang family of South America. Jiang Qinsong stared at Qin Weibai, and the killing intent was surging all over his body, like a beast that would pounce on her at any time. Qin Weibai looked at Jiang Qinsong's eyes calmly. "What the hell do you want?" Jiang Qinsong gritted his teeth and asked word by word. "To be exact, what do the three of us want?" Qin Weibai said. Jiang Qinsong sneered. In extreme anger, his body trembled a little. But such a lineup really made him unable to resist. He glanced around and finally said coldly, "Name your price." "The Lin clan doesn't need it." Lin Fengting said blandly. Jiang Qinsong was stunned and did not speak. "I will talk to Mr. Jiang on behalf of Zhongzhou State. I will say in advance that there are many things. If you agree, Zhongzhou State will spare your life tonight." Gong Sun Chi said. He used the word spare. Jiang Qinsong's facial muscles twitched fiercely and he looked at Qin Weibai. "The Samsara Palace needs a batch of equipment and weapons. I will give you a list. The list can be reduced, but the Jiang family of South America must give the Samsara Palace some cloud silk and lingjin." Qin Weibai's tone was as cold as a knife. The blade was bright and sharp. At this moment, Jiang Qinsong really felt that a piece of his flesh had been cut off, and blood was dripping. Not to mention the number of armaments that Qin Weibai wanted. The cloud silk and lingjin were the treasures of the Jiang family of South America. The cloud silk was the clothes that Li Tianlan and Gong Sun Chi wore. Its defense was extremely strong. Only a woman like Qin Weibai, who wanted to give everything to Li Tianlan, and a superpower like Zhongzhou State, were willing to make a whole set of cloud silk clothes. Jiang Qinsong, who claimed to have the best defense in the world, only had a cloud silk undershirt. The cloud silk preserved by the Jiang family of South America could barely make a piece of clothes for Jiang Guochu, who claimed to be the future of the Jiang family of South America. If all these were given to Qin Weibai, the Jiang family of South America would lose a trump card. As for Lingjin, Jiang Qinsong's eyes flickered, as if he wanted to see through Qin Weibai completely. "I don't know what you're talking about." Jiang Qinsong looked at Qin Weibai and asked, "Lingjin? You don't know?" Qin Weibai asked. "I." Jiang Qinsong just opened his mouth. "You don't know, but Jiang Guochu will know. If I kill you and exchange your body for Lingjin, do you think your son will exchange it?" It didn't matter whether he exchanged it or not. What mattered was that Qin Weibai was a powerful threat. Who betrayed the Jiang family of South America? Jiang Qinsong suddenly calmed down. "I can give you Lingjin if you want, but I must know the name of the traitor." In essence, Lingjin, murderous weapons, and cloud silk were all space meteorites. The murderous weapons used to be life metal. After being transformed, they became murderous weapons that shocked the dark world. After being transformed, cloud silk became a defensive treasure. As for the nature of Lingjin, it was more complicated, and the energy it contained was more mysterious. After the Jiang family of South America got Lingjin, they had been secretly studying it and adding countless substances. Now Lingjin could almost be said to be a new substance. As for the use of Lingjin, there were also a lot of theoretical speculations. This matter was really top secret in the Jiang family of South America. Jiang Qinsong must know who revealed this news to Qin Weibai. A traitor of this level was not much less important than Ling Jin. Qin Weibai thought for a moment and said slowly, "Okay, I'll tell you the clues when I get it." Jiang Qinsong took a deep look at her. At least this sentence had proved a lot of things. Qin Weibai could give him clues. This meant that South America, there was really a traitor in the Jiang family. In fact, it was enough to know this. "I need to make a phone call," Jiang Qinsong said with a poker face. "Whatever," Qin Weibai said. Jiang Qinsong took out his mobile phone and dialed a number. When the number was connected, he suddenly raised his head and looked at Qin Weibai. "Is there really a traitor in the Jiang family of South America?" "Yes." Qin Weibai nodded. Jiang Qinsong said, "Oh," and suddenly asked straightforwardly, "It's Jiang Guochu, isn't it?" This question was extremely abrupt. Jiang Guochu was a traitor of the Jiang family of South America. Gong Sun Qi froze for a moment. Even Lin Fengting froze for a moment. This moment was extremely subtle and short. But in an instant, Jiang Qinsong, who had been prepared, suddenly raised his hand and threw the mobile phone at Lin Fengting. As soon as the mobile phone left his hand, a dazzling light suddenly burst out with the broken mobile phone. The whole night sky suddenly turned pale. This time only lasted for a second. Jiang Qinsong rushed forward without hesitation. For the first time in his nearly 60 years of life, Jiang Qinsong gave up all his defense so boldly and unrestrainedly. Attack! Attack with all his strength. 30-meter mortal world's gloomy hell. The cold killing intent broke out completely with the distorted space. What Jiang Qinsong needed was this moment, the most perfect moment. Lin Fengting was blocked for a moment. And Jiang Qinsong chose Qin Weibai. At this moment, no one could stop him from attacking Qin Weibai. Lin Fengting couldn't do it. Neither could Gong Sun Qi. Only death awaited Qin Weibai. The distorted and broken space suddenly spread out. Jiang Qinsong reached out and waved his fist. But he hit nothing. How could it be? Jiang Qinsong said subconsciously. This moment was too short. How could Qin Weibai's reaction be so fast? The violent sword energy surged and boiled in an instant. An absolute dark sword intent appeared in the pale light. The sword intent spread and suppressed the white light almost in an instant. At the moment when black and white alternated, Jiang Qinsong subconsciously took a step back, and there was chaos in front of him. He blinked hard and looked straight ahead. Qin Weibai still stood where she was and didn't move. How could it be? Jiang Qinsong's face changed dramatically, and he repeated what he had just said. Countless sword energy kept rotating and whistling around him. There was silence between heaven and earth. Footsteps suddenly sounded. Jiang Qinsong turned his head slightly. In his sight. Outside the storm of sword intent. Qin Weibai. Lin Fengting. Gong Sun Qi slowly walked over from another direction. So in Jiang Qinsong's sight, there were 2 Qin Weibai, 2 Lin Fengting, and 2 Gong Sun Qis. Jiang Qinsong's heart kept sinking. The sword intent was whistling in front of him. More and more footsteps kept sounding. From all directions, one figure after another slowly came over. More and more figures came, almost covering the mountains and plains. They were exactly the same people. They were all Qin Weibai. The sword intent was still whistling. On the top of the mountain, at the foot of the mountain. Thousands of Qin Weibai stood there, almost occupying the whole world. Qin Weibai was a beauty. No one in the whole dark world dared to deny this. This kind of beauty was flawless, like a dream or a fantasy. It was devastatingly beautiful, and it was peerless. But when thousands of the same Qin Weibai appeared in front of him, this kind of beauty turned into pressure and almost suffocating power. Jiang Qinsong's face was pale. Looking at the increasing figures, he felt like he was in a nightmare. In the face of such a strange scene, Jiang Qiansong couldn't even say a complete word. The Qin Weibai all over the mountains and plains seemed to form an identical legion, and the legion was slowly advancing. Jiang Qiansong swallowed with difficulty, and his voice became unprecedentedly dry. This is the transcendent realm in the spiritual domain? The transcendent realm. In the world, only the Pope had reached the transcendent realm in the spiritual domain. The scene in front of him might be the manifestation of the transcendent realm, or it might not be. But these were not what Jiang Qiansong could see through. What he was good at was defending against attacks. Qin Weibai didn't answer this question. She held the cup and lowered her head to drink some water. Then she looked up at Jiang Qiansong, whose face was pale, and said lightly, "Do you want to die? Divine Emperor of 9 Heavens." Chapter 462. Compared with Eastern Europe, which was already in a storm, Jianghu state, which claimed to be the strongest country in the world, was still calm. However, under the pressure of almost all the powerful countries in the world, the calm hidden dragon's sea had long become oppressive and dull. Every high-level official in Jianghu state was paying close attention to the situation in Eastern Europe. Eastern Europe was in chaos. If they wanted to gain something in the chaos, they needed an indomitable spirit. This was the truth. But no one had expected Li Tianlan to act so fast that no one had time to respond. The war in Wulan state was vigorous. The only thing Jianghu state could do was to be silent. Jianghu state's statement to the outside world was that it had lost contact with Li Tianlan. In fact, from the war in Wulan state to the present, Jianghu state had never contacted Li Tianlan. Everyone was closely watching everything in Wulan state, and everyone knew the importance of this battle. Li Tianlan led the Snowdance Corps to battle. The result of this battle was related to the international image and prestige of Jianghu state, as well as the glory of the Li family in the past. Therefore, no matter for Jianghu state or Li Tianlan, they could only win this battle. Dongqing Wudi talked with Li Huaqing in the Hidden Dragon Sea all night last night. When Reki City gradually fell into the night, Yuzhou had already ushered in the morning. The sky was slightly dim. The air was slightly cool. The two top giants in the entire Jianghu state in the chaos in Eastern Europe walked out of the president's office and walked unhurriedly in the Hidden Dragon Sea. Dongqing Wudi's face was relaxed and peaceful. Even when the war broke out in Reki City and Jianghu state was under the greatest pressure, he never showed the slightest worry or anxiety. As for President Li Huaqing of Jianghu state, he had already begun to talk about the future. It's necessary to strengthen the relationship with the Qin clan. We didn't take down Wulan state back then, so the attitude of the Qin clan has been very ambiguous for many years. This time, Qin Shilai took the initiative to take action, which is a good opportunity. The Arctic Ocean Command has had a hard time in recent years. This time, if we take down Wulan state, we can really revitalize the game of Eastern Europe. At this time, if we can get the support of the Qin clan, it will be of great significance to us. In the slightly dim morning light, Li Huaqing handed Dongqing Wudi a cigarette with a smile and said in a casual tone. Dongqing Wudi lit his cigarette, took a deep breath, and nodded. The situation in Eastern Europe is chaotic, but it's very simple in essence. In the final analysis, it's a game between the four families. Now Rekvia is close to Jianghu state. If we can persuade the Qin clan, our position in Eastern Europe will be completely stable. Tianlan did a good job this time. To be honest, I'm amazed by his decisiveness and speed. Li Huaqing smiled and said, "Well, in a few days, I plan to go to Wulan state in person and bring a group there. I will only inform the Ministry of Foreign Affairs." Is Wudi interested? Dongqing Wudi hesitated, shook his head and said, "I'm not sure yet. The military has been quite busy lately." Now he was the standing minister of the army headquarters. If Jianghu state was in a sensitive period of war, the power of this position was even greater than that of the prime minister. Even in the prosperous times, Dongqing Wudi's current position could be regarded as the third most powerful person in Jianghu state in terms of real power. His position was there, but the army headquarters was not the border control corps after all. It was difficult for him to keep his word. Li Tianlan was now in Eastern Europe, and he could be said to be Li Tianlan's biggest supporter. At this time, it was much safer for him to stay in the army headquarters to control the situation than to go to Eastern Europe in person. How can I not be sure? Li Huaqing laughed. He seemed to want to say something else, but Dongqing Wudi's cell phone rang first. Dongqing Wudi glanced at the number, and his face froze slightly. After he picked it up, he said hello in a deep voice. The person on the other end of the phone reported something in a very fast tone. Dongqing Wudi's body became completely relaxed. He put down the phone and said slowly, Tianlan has arrived at the office of the president. Li Huaqing suddenly burst out laughing and was in high spirits. This news completely showed that the long and complicated night in Reki City was completely over. Reki City now had Li Tianlan and the Snowdance Corps. There was even Sword Emperor Wang Tianzong. The 5 Eastern European countries, headed by Wulan State, were like a thorn inserted between Zhongzhou State and the Arctic Ocean Command. From tonight on, they would all operate under the will of Zhongzhou State. This was Li Tianlan's credit. But wasn't it also Li Huaqing's achievement? Then you and I should go to Eastern Europe and see how elegant the star flag is in a foreign country. Li Huaqing said in high spirits. His term of office had come to an end. Since taking office, Li Huaqing's actions had been wise and steady. But surrounded by the general trend of Zhongzhou State, he could not be regarded as a strong president. He had only shown a little bit of brilliance in recent years. The chaos in Eastern Europe was so perfect that Li Huaqing really wanted to show off the power of Zhongzhou State to the world. Why don't you let Tianlan come back? Dongqing Wudi's face was extremely calm. He suddenly said calmly. Come back? Li Huaqing froze for a moment, narrowed his eyes, and looked at Dongqing Wudi. It's enough to do this. Dongqing Wudi said. But he only stayed in Eastern Europe for less than a day. Li Huaqing felt that this request was extremely absurd. Plus some aftermath work, he can always stay for a week. And time doesn't mean anything. Tianlan's actions are right there. Who dares to deny his merits? The original intention of Zhongzhou State to restart the Snowdance Corps was essentially to compete for the interests of Eastern Europe. Li Tianlan's series of actions could be said to be really swift and decisive. Within a day, the 5 countries in Eastern Europe changed. The Jianghu family of South America suffered heavy losses. Rekvia turned to Zhongzhou State and even established a good relationship with the Qin clan. No matter what the process was, the result was perfect. It could even be said that this was the interest that Zhongzhou State wanted. From today on, the Arctic Ocean Command would become a force that no one in Europe could ignore. Zhongzhou State would become extremely aloof in all of Eastern Europe. Enough. It was really enough. Countless superpowers were involved in the chaos in Eastern Europe. Every power had the ambition to completely take over Eastern Europe, but no one thought that they could really do it. This was a game involving the entire dark world. There would be countless losers who would leave in the middle of the game. But there might not be only one winner in the end. Li Tianlan had done this. Zhongzhou State, which had gained control of the 5 countries in Eastern Europe, was now one of the winners. It was enough to do this. Li Huaqing looked at Dongqing Wudi and frowned without saying a word. Dongqing Wudi's expression was still indifferent, but his voice suddenly became cold. Mr. President, who do you think let King Tong go to Reki City? What do you mean? Li Huaqing's face became completely serious. She went to Reki City because she and the Shadow Throne appealed to the interests of Wulan State, but Wang Tianzong might have acquiesced in it. The incident of the 5 countries in Eastern Europe was a great contribution, which was enough to help Tianlan get out of the trap in Eastern Europe. He took down the 5 countries in Eastern Europe, was seriously injured, and returned to China to recuperate. Who could say anything more? King Tong went to Reki City and wanted to snatch the interests of the 5 countries in Eastern Europe from Tianlan. Although the Wang family of Beihai didn't want to give up the 5 countries in Eastern Europe, with Wang Tianzong's courage, he wouldn't show such an ugly expression. Wang Tianzong wanted Reki City not because of those interests. The most important thing was that he didn't want Tianlan to take all the credit and return to Zhongzhou state. Dongxing Wudi said in a cold voice, he still has his plan. He wants Tianlan to die in Eastern Europe on the charge of treason. At that time, he will get the currently family, the giant group, and even the chaos within the southeast group. With these, what are the 5 countries in Eastern Europe? Li Huaqing thought for a while and then said slowly, so you want Tianlan to come back? Yes. Dongxing Wudi nodded. It's the best time for him to come back. The more Wang Tianzong doesn't want Tianlan to do, the more we have to let him do it. No. Li Huaqing said softly. His voice was soft but full of firmness. He can't come back. Dongxing Wudi looked at Li Huaqing and narrowed his eyes quietly. Li Huaqing suddenly smiled. Wudi, do you know why I support Tianlan? Why did Li Huaqing support Li Tianlan? This was tantamount to asking why the academics supported Li Tianlan. Thinking about it in this way, there would be many answers. The reason why Li Huaqing was not strong was that the academics did not have enough foundation and could not compete with the Southeast Group and the Prince Group. The academics had no power in the most sensitive special warfare system. By supporting Li Tianlan, the academics wanted to fight for a future. By supporting Li Tianlan, it was tantamount to winning over Sai City. By supporting Li Tianlan, it could get a lot of chips from Samsara Palace. By supporting Li Tianlan, the academics now had the support of the giant group. These were all reasons. But that wasn't the only reason. Because Tianlan is suitable. Li Huaqing gave the answer quietly. Daybreak's eyes shone on his face, and there was a profound halo in his eyes. From a selfish point of view, supporting Tianlan will bring me a lot of benefits, but I also have to bear a lot of risks and costs. The collapse of the Li family was full of inside stories. Now I support Tianlan. From a certain point of view, it is tantamount to supporting the civil strife of the special warfare system of Zhongzhou state in the next few years, and even the civil strife of the whole Zhongzhou state. So many people don't like Tianlan and the Li family. Even those who used to respect the Li family may feel that what happened to the Li family today is unfair, but they will not welcome the Li family back to the high-level stage of Zhongzhou state, because the general trend does not allow it, because the Wang family of Beihai and Kunlun City do not allow it. If they do not allow it, and the Li family does not listen, there will be war, turmoil, conflict, and even chaos. What I said today may become the most unstable factor in Zhongzhou state in the next few years, and it may also bring irreversible losses and harm to Zhongzhou state. If these things happen, I will be responsible, and so will you. Dongxing Wudi listened quietly without saying a word. But I still chose to support Tianlan and the chaos he will bring to Zhongzhou state in the future. All of this is because of his entrance maneuver at the Sky Academy. Li Huaqing said quietly. Dongxing Wudi thought of that entrance maneuver. Li Tianlan killed 2 important tasks of the Lu family in that maneuver. Dongxing Wudi wondered what the reason was. Kunlun City is very good. For now, it's really good. Gu Xingyun may have been despicable at the beginning, but none of us can deny that in the more than 20 years since he became the war god of Zhongzhou state, he has never done anything wrong to Zhongzhou state. But I think Kunlun City is still not qualified. If Gu Xingyun is the second in command of the special warfare system, or just a big force in Zhongzhou state, I can accept it. In these positions, Gu Xingyun will even do better. In the more than 20 years since he became the war god of Zhongzhou state, foreign superpowers have rarely invaded Zhongzhou state, but the prestige of Zhongzhou state in the dark world has been declining. Why? Because Gu Xingyun is too shrewd. He is like a businessman. He will choose to weigh and compromise. Even I am amazed by the subtlety of his advance and retreat in some things. Li Huaqing laughed self-deprecatingly. But this is not what I want. It's not what Zhongzhou state wants. It shouldn't even be what Gu Xingyun should have. The war god of Zhongzhou state can weigh, compromise, and be like a businessman. He can do anything, but only one thing, he can't retreat. He is the war god of Jianghu state, and he protects the whole Jianghu state. How can he retreat? He can't retreat even a step. That is a position where there is no retreat. No matter what he encounters, whether it is a storm, a huge wave, a thunderbolt, a landslide, or the end of the world, he is the war god, and he must stand there. He can only move forward and never retreat. Because behind him, one step away, is the whole country he wants to protect. Li Huaqing took a deep breath. Gu Xingyun can't do this. Although he has done a good job over the years, if he encounters a more severe situation that he can't handle, he will definitely retreat. But the Li family in the past would not do that, and neither would the current Li family. Li Honghe, Li Tianlan, and even Li Guangtu, any one of them in this position would do their best when they encountered a crisis that they could not handle. Even if they died there, they would not take half a step back. They would rather break than bend and die than retreat. This is the war god of Jianghu state I want. Tianlan's performance in Eastern Europe proves that my choice is correct. But if you let him come back now, maybe after many years, he will become another Gu Xingyun. This is not what I want, really not. Li Huaqing looked at the silent Dongqing Wudi and said softly, "And are you sure that if you let Tianlan come back now, he will come back?" Dongqing Wudi thought for a while and shook his head. "I'm not sure." "I'm sure." Li Huaqing laughed. "At this time, even if you ask him to come back, he won't come back. But it's too dangerous for him to be in Eastern Europe." Dongqing Wudi frowned. "Qin Weibai is there," Li Huaqing said softly. He looked into Dongqing Wudi's eyes. "Wudi, remember, don't underestimate Qin Weibai at any time. I mean at any time. As for some risks, they are destined to exist. It's the case in Eastern Europe and everything Tianlan will encounter in the future. If he loses on the trip to Eastern Europe, the giant group will not have a good end, and the academics will not be able to stay out of trouble. But if he wins, he will win the qualification to replace Gu Xingyun. Such a war god of Jianghu state is the most reassuring to me." Li Huaqing said softly, "It's about the future of a country. I'm willing to bet the future of the giant group and the academics on a stable future for Jianghu state." Chapter 463. In his own country, in his own capital, in his own power center, he was asked to give up his seat by a foreign marshal. This could be said to be the most humiliating moment in the history of Wulan state. It was also the most humiliating moment in President Carlos's life. There was a flash of anger in his eyes, and he looked up at Li Tianlan's eyes. This was the office of the president. He was sitting here in the high-level conference room. He was the core of the entire Wulan state. Li Tianlan said that this was not his seat. This was his seat. That was what Carlos thought. So in the conference room that was still echoing with the smell of blood, he said so directly. "Your Highness, this is my seat." Carlos said. Li Tianlan suddenly laughed. Judging from his appearance, he really had nothing to do with the word handsome. He had a very ordinary face. Because he was young, he was slightly delicate. But at this time, when Li Tianlan laughed, he had an unparalleled style, cold and awe-inspiring. He looked back at the high-level officials in the conference room and said calmly, "Who can testify?" At this moment, Li Tianlan stood there. Even though he was seriously injured and pale, he still had a kind of domineering aura. He was awe-inspiring. The whole conference room was silent. No matter if they were in favor of war or peace, no one made a sound when their president was asked to give up his seat. Secretive politicians, iron-blooded generals, everyone's blood seemed to freeze with the death of General Joel. Of course, humiliation would be embarrassing. But living was more important than anything else. It was anything else. Carlos's eyes swept across every high-level official in the conference room. Every one of the higher-ups who met his gaze subconsciously turned their heads away. Even the Prime Minister turned his head. Carlos's face was a little pale. In a short period of time, he only got one feeling when he looked at everyone. The feeling of being betrayed. Li Tianlan's fingers tapped on the table unhurriedly and said calmly, "Stand up." His voice was very soft. However, Carlos could see an undisguised killing intent in his eyes. Carlos finally clearly realized the identity of the other party. The other party was the martial and the special warfare system of Jianghu state, not belonging to the military. He was the youngest highness in the dark world. He was a madman who broke the deadlock in Eastern Europe without hesitation. In one day, 3 invincible realm experts died, and 2 of them were killed by him. Now that he had the most elite army in the world, he was almost undefeatable. The youngest prince. The most elite army. The former conquered Rekvia in a single day. The latter defeated Wulan state in one day. He was invincible. Carlos slowly stood up. He looked at many high-level officials who lowered their heads as if they could not see this scene, and smiled self-mockingly. Today, you not only gave up on me, but also on Wulan state. No one would support him, the president who was forced to give up his position in his own mansion. After today, he was destined to step down. But who would these people who still sat at the top of Wulan state represent in the future? Carlos suddenly realized that he was no longer qualified to think about this question. He slowly turned around and walked out the door. A voice rang out behind him. "Stop right there." Carlos's body stiffened. He turned to look at Li Tianlan and asked, "Your Highness, what can I do for you?" Before today, Jianghu state and Wulan state had always been close friends, Li Tianlan said calmly. There can be misunderstandings between friends. After that, it's nothing more than an apology and a meal to solve the problem. However, misunderstandings between countries could lead to death. The Jiang family of South America intends to get involved in Wulan state and even wants to set off a political revolution here. For the sake of the stability of Wulan state, I rushed hundreds of miles away, but I was regarded as an enemy by Wulan state. Li Tianlan laughed. His smile was cold and ferocious. The luxurious conference table began to collapse silently. Wood chips flew everywhere. As the sword energy swept through, a large amount of dust fell to the ground. More than 2,000 elite soldiers were buried in Eastern Europe. Is this all because of our enthusiasm? Jianghu state has the feelings of a great country, but does my army deserve to die? Wulan state, Oga state, and Ra state should be mainly responsible for this matter. You don't give me an explanation, but ask me what else I want. What else do you want? Jirosis instinctively sensed the danger. This kind of danger did not come from Li Tianlan's killing intent, but from the instinct of being in a high position and used to seeing countless conspiracies. His palm trembled subconsciously, and he forced himself to calm down and said, "Prime Minister Rieker can give you the explanation that your Highness wants." Rieker, who had been extremely silent since Li Tianlan appeared, suddenly raised his head and looked at Li Tianlan. His eyes were a little nervous and even a little pleading. General Tostel, the new patriarch of Rekvia, put a cup of coffee in front of Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan picked it up and took a sip. In a short period of time, countless eyes in the conference room met and intertwined, and the atmosphere became extremely strange. Li Tianlan glanced thoughtfully at Prime Minister Rieker, who was tense, and then shook his head. He looked at Carlos and said lightly, "I only want to talk to you about this matter." Prime Minister Rieker, who had been in a cold sweat in a short period of time, breathed a sigh of relief. He looked at Li Tianlan, and there was a flash of gratitude in his eyes. No matter how absurd Li Tianlan's previous words were, at least he wanted Wulan state to give him an explanation. This matter was true. And this matter was very normal. Li Tianlan won tonight. If Jiang Qiansong won tonight, he would also want an explanation. The key was that such an explanation was easy to give, but also not easy to give. It was understandable that Li Tianlan wanted an explanation. But who dared to talk to Li Tianlan at the top of Wulan state? Whoever talked would die. Jianghu state was under great pressure in one day. More than 2,000 soldiers were sacrificed, and they encountered a Li family that desperately needed all kinds of strength. The price that Li Tianlan was about to offer, the so-called explanation he wanted, would definitely be unimaginably high. Ceding land, indemnities, and all kinds of conditions were enough to be recorded in the history of Wulan State. The saddest thing was that there was almost no room for bargaining with Li Tianlan in today's Wulan State. The Snowdance Corps dispatched only 5,000 elites. They acted in batches. 3,000 people directly defeated half of Wulan State's military force without heavy firepower. If 20,000 people of the Snowdance Corps were dispatched at the same time, what would happen? Under such circumstances, no matter what Li Tianlan asked, Wulan State could only accept it. Whoever represented Wulan State to talk to Li Tianlan about this matter would have his name recorded in the history of Wulan State. It was not to be recorded in history. The price to pay for losing power and humiliating a country was to be infamous for thousands of years. There were only two people present who were most qualified to be infamous for thousands of years. One was President Carlos. The other was Prime Minister Riker. Li Tianlan chose Carlos. From this moment on, Riker knew that he was safe, and Carlos was completely abandoned. Jianghu State abandoned Carlos. They needed someone with enough prestige to take control of the current situation. Riker was the only candidate. He could even become the president and become a key pawn for Li Tianlan to stay in Wulan State to check and balance Rekvia. At this moment, everything could be said to be a national disaster for Wulan State. But Prime Minister Riker suddenly found that his future might be infinitely beautiful. He froze in place, and his thoughts were complicated. For a moment, he seemed to have forgotten how much he needed to pay for this kind of beauty. Your Highness. Carlos suddenly emphasized, this is Wulan State. State. Yes. Li Tianlan said calmly, my Wulan State. Carlos suddenly felt powerless. He stood in place with a blank face, and his heart was as dead as ashes. I can't represent Jianghu State fully, but here, I can represent the Snowdance Corps and the Arctic Ocean Command. So from my personal standpoint, I have two requirements. First, within 3 days, hand over the bodies of all the victims of the Snowdance Corps. They fought for Wulan State, but were killed by Wulan State. The compensation for each martyr in each country must not be less than 2 million yuan. Second, withdraw your accusation at the United Nations, apologize to Jianghu State at the United Nations meeting, clarify the misunderstanding, and expose the conspiracy of the Jiang family of South America. Jianghu State will be responsible for protecting the security of Wulan State and avoiding a repeat of today's incident. Wulan State is obliged to establish a garrison base for Jianghu State. As a witness of the reconciliation of the two countries, the star flag of Jianghu State must be seen wherever the flag of Wulan State can be seen in the future. Third, Your Highness, you said that you only had 2 requirements. A high-level official finally couldn't help but stand up. His face was extremely angry, and his eyes were full of shame. But his voice was extremely weak, and he seemed to be a little timid and out of breath. Li Tianlan glanced at him, thought for a moment, and said, "Did I say that?" The high-level official opened his mouth. Just as he was about to speak, Li Tianlan said expressionlessly, "Shut up. If you don't shut up, I'll make you close your eyes." The pale high-level official slowly sat down. Li Tianlan was silent for a while. He seemed to forget what he wanted to say. He shook his head, waved his hand, and said, "That's all. These are my requirements. Who agrees and who objects?" There was silence. But an unprecedented heaviness suddenly pressed on the hearts of every high-level official. Wulan State, which the Arctic Ocean Command had been trying to penetrate for more than 20 years, was finally lost. The loss to Wulan State was completely unimaginable. And everyone knew that this was only Li Tianlan's own request, not Jianghu State's. Li Tianlan asked for a lot, or it could be said to be very little, but it didn't matter. What mattered was that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Jianghu State would definitely take away all the things that should be taken away. But no one in the conference room spoke. No one dared. At this extremely delicate moment, as the winner, what Li Tianlan said was the law. Whoever dared to speak, Li Tianlan would definitely make him close his eyes. Li Tianlan waited for a while. Seeing that no one spoke, he nodded and said directly, "The meeting is over." Again, no one objected. The high-level officials stood up one by one and walked out of the conference room in turn. President Carlos did not leave. Prime Minister Riker did not leave either. Qin Shilai, who followed Li Tianlan in, nodded to Li Tianlan, followed Tostel out of the conference room, and closed the door of the conference room. There were only Li Tianlan and the two highest authorities of Wulan State in the entire conference room. "You're very smart." Li Tianlan looked at Prime Minister Riker and said calmly. The Prime Minister, who had never bowed to anyone in Wulan State, bowed deeply to Li Tianlan and did not get up for a long time. Li Tianlan casually pointed at the coffee cup in front of him. Riker stood up, took the cup, and walked to the coffee machine. Li Tianlan glanced at Carlos and said calmly, "Sit down." Carlos seemed to have completely calmed down. He slowly sat on the chair next to Li Tianlan. "Riker, you're right." "Yes. But not enough." Li Tianlan said slowly, "Jianghu State needs a dog that's obedient enough." "It's you who needs a dog that's obedient enough, isn't it?" Carlos looked at Li Tianlan and asked sarcastically. Li Tianlan smiled and did not speak. Carlos was silent for a while and said softly, "Will I die tonight?" His tone was subtle and complicated. Li Tianlan looked at him for a while and then said blandly, "Any last words?" Divine Emperor of 9 Heavens. Chapter 464. Carlos was silent for a long, long time. The situation in Wulan State changed in a day. He had thought of many endings and different endings. But before Li Tianlan stepped into the conference room, he did not think that he would die. Death. Permanent darkness. Great shame. Monstrous infamy. All of this would fall on him with his death, followed by a series of words that did not sound good, such as cowardice, incompetence, greed, and stupidity. His life, his reputation, and everything about him would be completely polluted and painted black, and there would be no possibility of washing it. In such a case, the so-called last words, is it meaningful? Carlos asked. It's meaningless. Li Tianlan shook his head. But before you die, if you are willing to say something, I can be a listener. This was the only thing Li Tianlan could do. He needed a very significant death to calm the great changes in Wulan State and completely nail the Jiang family of South America. The withdrawal of the Jiang family of South America. The advance of Jianghu State. The compromise and concession of Wulan State. All the crimes, all the inside stories, and all the shame needed to be borne by someone. President Carlos was the best candidate. His death would make everyone, including the people of Wulan State, have to accept the strong entry of the Snowdance Corps of Jianghu State into Wulan State. At the same time, it could also eliminate some pressure of international public opinion. Li Tianlan had no grudge against Carlos. But now the general trend wanted him to die. He could only die. Do you dare to kill me? Carlos stared into Li Tianlan's eyes. Death was close at hand, but it did not come. The tension lingering between life and death was like a hot torrent, rushing into his abdomen, all the way up his abdomen, and squeezing into his mind. Carlos's body was trembling slightly, and his eyes were red. Jiang Qinsong killed you. Li Tianlan whispered, I tried to save you, but I didn't succeed. You were attacked and sacrificed by the Jiang family of South America, and I saved Wulan State at the most critical moment. Lies. They're all lies. They're vulnerable. Carlos yelled. Lies are good for ruling. Li Tianlan's voice was full of indifference. You despicable, cruel, shameless, hypocritical invader. Carlos' breathing became more and more rapid. You deserve to die. Mr. President, please pay attention to your words. His Highness and the Jianghu State represented by His Highness are eternal friends of Wulan State. Prime Minister Rieker walked over with a wooden tray. On the tray was a cup of warm coffee and a steak made by the Prime Minister himself. Rick respectfully placed the tray in front of Li Tianlan. He turned around and looked into Carlos's eyes, which were burning with anger. He was extremely calm. You can say whatever you want. Li Tianlan cut a piece of steak and put it into his mouth. He lost a lot of blood after being seriously injured. He just dealt with the wound briefly and then came to the office of the president. Now his body was getting colder and colder, and he could hardly taste anything in his mouth. He bit the beef seriously and said calmly, "But I want to correct you too. From now on, the Snowdance Corps and I are not friends of Wulan State, but rulers." Prime Minister Rieker's body stiffened slightly for a moment, and then he said respectfully, "Your Highness is right." Prime Minister. Carlos's voice was twisted and crazed. "You're wrong again." Li Tianlan said calmly, "He is not the Prime Minister." Carlos glanced at Li Tianlan and sneered without saying a word. Li Tianlan nodded and took out a very ordinary pistol from his pocket. "It seems that you have nothing to say." He raised his hand and threw the gun to Prime Minister Rieker. He threw the gun to Prime Minister Rieker, but he said in another capacity, "President Rieker, kill him." Rieker's whole body shook. He caught the pistol, and his arms couldn't help trembling. Li Tianlan took out his mobile phone and aimed it at the two of them. He turned on the video mode, and then focused on the steak in front of him. "This steak is not big enough." His soft voice echoed in the conference room, like the whisper of the devil. "If you don't kill him before I finish eating, I will kill you too." Rieker's violently trembling palm held the pistol tightly and subconsciously aimed at Carlos. Carlos's face was pale, but his eyes were still burning with anger when he looked at Rieker. Rieker's arm trembled like a convulsion. At this moment, he might be holding the unprecedented sin in his life. But at the same time, as long as he pulled the trigger, he would get the power that he had never touched in his life. "I'm sorry." Rieker's voice was a little hoarse. It sounded ferocious and empty in the claustrophobic conference room. Behind him was the sound of the knife and fork rubbing against the porcelain plate, which sounded extremely evil. Rieker took a step forward. The muzzle was against Carlos's forehead. In the clear sound, Li Tianlan put down the knife and fork. Puff! The pistol with a silencer made a dull sound. The powerful bullet directly smashed Carlos's head. Fresh blood gushed to the ceiling like a crimson fountain, incomparably beautiful. Red blood beads splashed out and splashed on the plate in front of Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan took a sip of coffee, picked up his mobile phone and looked at the video. He nodded and said, "It's very clear. Do you want to have a look?" "Mr. President?" Rieker, who was covered in blood, shook his head with a pale face. He opened his mouth and finally couldn't help but retch. He held the trash can in the conference room and vomited. Li Tianlan waited for him to finish vomiting before he ordered, "There is a star flag of Jianghu State outside the conference room. Before dawn, I want to see it hung in the highest and most obvious position in Wulan City." Rieker, who was weak but had an abnormal blush on his face, nodded and said in a trembling voice, "As you wish, Your Highness." Li Tianlan nodded and put away the mobile phone that had recorded the scene just now. He casually touched Rieker's head and said expressionlessly, "Do a good job. I have high hopes for you." It was not until they entered the highest hotel in Reki City and entered the luxury suite that Wang Tianzong, who had been silent all the way, took the initiative to break the silence and asked, "Do you blame me?" King Tong, who had been following Wang Tianzong silently, shook her head. "I didn't know that Li Tianlan had two murderous weapons." Wang Tianzong gave an extremely rare explanation. King Tong said, looking extremely docile. Wang Tianzong turned around and walked to the balcony of the room, looking at the brightly lit Reki City in the night. Among the countless lights, a building not far away was particularly bright. It was wrapped in light and looked extremely majestic. That was the office of the president, the power center of Wulan State. At this moment, Li Tianlan should be there. Wang Tianzong looked in that direction with a calm face. He's very good. King Tong stood behind Wang Tianzong. Her emotions seemed to have completely adjusted, or perhaps she had deliberately suppressed them. No wonder Yue Tong likes him. Yes. Wang Tianzong nodded. But he deserves to die. King Tong reached out and touched her red lips. Her red lips were full and enchanting, but there was still the coldness and the taste of death that belonged to murderous weapons between her lips and teeth. King Tong narrowed her eyes, and a shocking evil spirit suddenly flashed in her golden eyes. Yes. Wang Tianzong nodded again. However, King Tong clearly felt that the other party was not perfunctory, but was saying this very seriously. If Li Tianlan didn't hold back his sword tonight, what would have happened? King Tong suddenly asked. Li Tianlan's martial arts was the real road of the chosen one. In terms of level, his sword intent was better than Wang Tianzong, Deity, and Lin Fengting. However, his sword energy was not enough, and his power was not strong enough for the time being. But tonight, Deity's sword energy and Li Tianlan's sword intent were combined. That was equivalent to the fusion of the Chosen One's sword intent and the sword energy of the peak of the Invincible Realm. Their swordsmanship was of the same origin. This was almost equivalent to the sword that Li Tianlan stabbed when he entered the peak of the Invincible Realm. Wang Tianzong was very strong. But at that time, he was unprepared. If he didn't hold back that sword, the possibility of Wang Tianzong being seriously injured in an instant was infinitely close to 100%. What would have happened then? King Tong suddenly felt a sense of fear in her heart. It's hard to say. Wang Tianzong was silent for a while and said blandly, if he had attacked with all his strength, he would have died, Deity would have died, and I would have been seriously injured. The possibility of breaking through again would have been zero, and I might even have fallen into the Invincible Realm. At that time, the chaos in Eastern Europe would have nothing to do with the Wang family of Beihai or Zhongzhou state. Beihai could get most of the benefits of the Li family and the giant group, but Beihai would also have to face countless people who would hit him when he was down. This was undoubtedly a very complicated consequence. And with so many complications added up, it was really hard to say what the final result would be. However, King Tong heard something different from this answer. She felt a little incredible and couldn't help but widen her eyes. Do you mean that you still have the possibility of continuing to break through? Now Wang Tianzong had surpassed the peak of the Invincible Realm. If he broke through again, he could only be the chosen one. There was a flash of surprise in King Tong's eyes. Can you still break through at your age? Wang Tianzong shook his head and then nodded. Above the peak of the Invincible Realm, it has nothing to do with age. To be exact, martial arts has little to do with age. The age of 40 is a recognized threshold. But over the years, there have been people who have broken through to the Invincible Realm at the age of 40. They are very few. But as long as there is one, even if there is one, it is enough to explain the problem. As for my current state, I can't describe it in detail. But now it's a very critical time. I'm not sure if I can take the last step. At present, I still need an opportunity. No wonder, King Tong murmured, no wonder you didn't do anything tonight. Wang Tianzong was about to break through. In this case, he naturally had to maintain the peak state and silently look for his own opportunity. Not entirely for this reason. Wang Tianzong said, in today's dark world, I can confirm that I am the strongest. But I am also sure that I am not invincible. This sentence was very heavy and bitter. Wang Tianzong was indeed the strongest, but he was not so strong that no one could pose a threat to him, so he didn't do anything tonight. If he took the last half step in martial arts tonight, even if he didn't do anything to Li Tianlan, at least Deity wouldn't be able to leave anyway. Wang Tianzong sighed softly, and there was a flash of unwillingness in his eyes. I believe in you. You can definitely take the last step, King Tong said softly. King Tong said softly. Her golden pupils were shining with undisguised worship and admiration, which were brilliant and charming. Wang Tianzong smiled and looked at the brightly lit office of the president in his sight. He was silent for a long time. The deadlock in Eastern Europe has been broken. After a long time, he said slowly. A cell phone suddenly rang. Wang Tianzong took out his cell phone and looked at it. It was a very short message, but the content was not simple. General Joel is dead. Wang Tianzong raised his eyebrows in surprise. He looked at his cell phone, and there seemed to be wind and clouds gathering in his eyes. After the deadlock, there is still a deadlock. He put away his cell phone and shook his head. It's really boring. You're tuning into the Carefree Valley YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.